Great. Here's Elizabeth.
Yeah. One of my absolute favorite things of any time those of us who are all working in or curious about solidarity economy, co-op world, etc., get together. There's always like, oh, see you since or forever. It's lovely,
Yeah,
a lovely coming together and
oh,
and rebuilding.
What a great looking young man. What is that young man's name?
This one is Sky Boon.
Cute, cute.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Good. All right. We'll keep on for another just moment or two. We'll keep clicking everybody in.
I can go ahead and make sure folks keep coming on in while you kick us off, Elias. If
Sure.
You want.
Okay. All right. Well, I did the most important thing. I remember to hit record, which I have occasionally not done. So good for me. All right. As we're trickling in, welcome everybody, friends, fellow travelers, kindred spirits, to this funny thing that we're doing today. Please identify yourselves in the chat if you'd like to, with your affiliation, because sometimes good networking comes out of that. And I am, as we're getting started, going to do a little quick land acknowledgement here. For the District of Columbia, I am now in the District of Columbia for all kinds of complicated reasons. And so we're on the ancestral lands of the Nacotchtank.
Elias?
Hang on a second, I'm going to mute somebody.
I got it. Welcome, our friend on the phone. We're just getting started. You're here when we can hear you.
Yeah. Hey, Rick, we can hear you. No worries. On the ancestral lands of the Nacotchtank and the Piscataway people, we pay respects to their elders, past and present, and wherever you are, please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And I want to do one more thing, because spirituality is going to come up in this conversation. And an aspect of that struck me before we start the celebration is the way in which we so rarely have a public moment to express any kind of grief or mourning together. And whether you're thinking of the last couple of weeks, the last year, the last 4 years, when we lost 1 million in the US, we don't have many public moments to do that. So I thought we might just take one brief moment of silence to reflect and mourn together as a way of just feeling whole, or trying to feel whole about all these things that have happened to us all. All right, thanks. I'm so happy to be here with Sassy Sassoon, who is something called a culture circle lead. And I want you to say hello and tell us what's going on. What is that about?
Yeah, so I'm Kate or Sassy, whichever y'all prefer. It's nice to see some of you again, as always, and also nice to meet some of you and build solidarity with you here in this space. I'm a longtime co-opper, solidarity economy worker of various flavors. I run my own business called Sassy Facilitation, which helps co-oppers cooperate. I especially focus on governance, communication, and decision-making. And I'm currently the Culture Circle lead, which is essentially one of the co-executive body people at Zebras Unite. And I see some of our members in the room and some of our board members. So good to be in overlapping community. The Culture Circle lead, we have our own governance system based loosely on sociocracy, and our Culture Circle lead basically helps I hold and steward all things paradigm shift at Zebras Unite. So we're trying to bring the zebra flavored way to the pantheon of solidarity economy tools, and I hold how we try and do paradigm shift work, specifically through culture and all sorts of things like it. So that's what I'm up to, and I'm here in support today. I'm gonna be holding some space. I'm gonna be watching the chat. I'm gonna be helping pass the mic between folks, and Eliza's gonna be our mascot today. So I appreciate in advance if I have to disappear to take care of a diaper real quick. I know y'all got it.
Well, yeah, we know about that. Well, so you can see why I asked her to co-host, right? You can see. Also, I don't know, we're still kind of accumulating people here, but very quickly, I want to recognize our partner organizations, one of which is Zebras Unite, Sassy's organization. And also, there's the MEDLab at the University of Colorado. That's Nathan. There's the Platform Cooperative Consortium in New York. That's Trevor Schultz. Also, Shareable, and that's Neil Garenflo and Tom Llewellyn, both of whom will show up today. And finally, Start.coop, those wonderful people.
Hello.
Muting here. Okay, I also want to mention quickly a steering committee that helped me organize this little event, and hopefully will also be working with me going forward and figure out what we want to do. And that's Pete Davis, Tony Annette, Maddie Ulanow, Michael Centauri, Michael's here today, Grace Potts, Jamie Kralovec, Shalonda Ingram, Matthew Epperson, Nate Tenor Williams, Molly Burhans, Sam Rocha, Gary Gardner, Teresa Morad, and Edgar Rivera Colon, who we'll hear from at the end. So there are a number of other wonderful leaders in this group today. It's getting to be now too many for me to stop the train and recognize everybody. But thank you for taking the time to take a look at this little project. And what I want to do is, first of all, begin by explaining quite simply from the name what this is.
Elias.
I'm trying one more time, my friend here. He's trying to unmute. Okay. So Solidarity Workshop, the two big pieces obviously are a concept and then a practical endeavor. You know, the best way to understand solidarity is to realize this is a term that comes from different places, but there is now more of a growing agreement as to what the solidarity economy really means, and even some principles that drive it. I asked Sassy to talk us through that a little bit, just quickly. When people refer to the solidarity economy, what is it, this thing that sounds so foreign? What is this about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel confident that we could articulate both as many versions of that solidarity economy as there are people in this room. We all touch the many sides of the dodecahedron, the elephant, what you will. But I feel like even as we glory in our multiplicity, there are some, basic common articulations that I think we could all get behind, even if we may use different words in our spaces and with our people. And so I like to riff off the ones that are the folks over at the Solidarity Economy Principles folks have put together. So I'll just kind of run down those, and I invite you to sort of translate them into whatever the version of that is at the work that you do in the space that you're holding in this glorious multiplicity of different flavors of solidarity. So there are 5 basic principles, right? Collective care, relationships, and accountability, really speaking to the connection and the mutuality of that, of how we do this. Shared resources and shared vision, right? We come together and we build together. Liberation culture, we recognize and work toward a truth that none of us are free until all of us are free, as we recognize our common humanity and our common sharedness. Democracy and process, we hypothesize that this is better together when we share power and when we co-create how we do that. And education and leadership development, we recognize that we are doing our best and we need to grow and change and improve always, and grow up folks behind us to keep doing this work so that it may continue on beyond us into the future, as it continued before we got here, and we continue the work of those who were before us. So yeah, that's the kind of the basics. That's how I like to think of them. I invite you, if anybody's got a particularly lovely articulation or another, as we like to say at Zebras, some sprinkles or some seasoning to put on that, I invite it in the chat. But that's kind of the realm of things that we're thinking about today.
Great, beautiful, that's perfect. Thanks, Sassy. In some ways, what we're doing here is the work of repair, not the work so much of innovation. And I just want to say that basically we're just trying to be something like social mechanics, trying to expand our imaginations about this work, and hopefully to restore work's social and world building dimension. So we'll come back to that subject of good work a little bit later on. I am very happy to have Elizabeth Garlow here. Elizabeth has raised her hand to be the sort of the spirituality lead on this odd project we have going. And I'd love for her to talk about that a little bit. We've barely begun our own conversations internally, but she's been thinking about this for some time. So Elizabeth, could you check in and give us your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yes. Hi,
Howdy.
everyone.
Howdy.
Howdy. I'm Elizabeth Garlow. I'm here in Detroit, Michigan. I co-direct something called the Francesco Collaborative, which is a network of investors that are drawing on faith principles, especially Catholic social teaching principles, to invest in the solidarity economy. So at Elias's invitation, I spent a little time in reflection on this idea of flying with two wings, these two wings of solidarity and spirituality. So I'm just going to share that reflection with you. And I'm a little bit under rested because my 2-year-old is getting her molars. And so I did write something. So if I'm not looking at you straight in the eye, it's because I'm referring to my notes, which I needed this morning. But yeah, so this morning I actually spent a precious early morning hour with my 2-year-old building with Legos. And it struck me that as she was kind of eagerly stacking one Lego on top of the other, she didn't actually know what she was building. There wasn't really any certainty of like a tower or some kind of elaborate structure. She was just engaged in the present moment in this in-between space of what was and what was yet to be. And I often consider this kind of work of the solidarity economy to be similarly in that space in between. It has like a prophetic dimension to it. You can catch glimmers of it. You can kind of get these pockets of the future in the present, a more beautiful economic future, but it is still very much unfolding. And it has this kind of bold and visionary quality to it. So when we engage in prophetic work, we are announcing what we think can be, this kind of more beautiful future that we imagine. And to transition to that future does require a lot of courageous experimentation in community. So for those who recently celebrated Passover or are in the midst of the Easter season, you might have this kind of ripe sense of this in-between space, because the story of Exodus and the passage through the Red Sea, or the story of Holy Saturday, these kind of 3 days in between the death and resurrection of Jesus, these are also in-between spaces. These are these spaces where we sort of can't yet see the promise of hope. We struggle to imagine that a different future is possible. We still want to believe, but we're kind of unsure. So if we lift our gaze, especially to gaze into the eyes of one another, we can see that in the midst of this sense of loss or confusion, there are new horizons. They're almost imperceptible at first, but they do come. They come as sure as day follows night. And so this work of building an economy of solidarity, I think, does have a spiritual quality to it. It is prophetic in that it's in this in-between space, but it's also, as Sassy just shared, it's about recognizing and embodying this shared humanity and the shared integral ecology, not just our humanity, but our relationships with all of created reality. So getting to that place, I think, often does require some aspect of personal journeying, personal transformation, because sometimes we have to shed an inherited logic that tells us what a good life should be or what is good for society, because that logic, especially for those of us here in the West, is often rooted in extraction that breaches planetary boundaries through excessive consumption, or something that Pope Francis himself calls a throwaway culture. So when we lean into this personal transformation, we're more prepared for this collective imagining that we need to build new systems. To strengthen us in these efforts to imagine new presence and new horizons that are rooted in genuine love and solidarity, I think we can draw from a lot of different spiritual and wisdom traditions. They can sort of offer us a wellspring of nourishment. They can point us to timeless wisdom that we can keep making anew over and over in our present day. And they can remind us of some of the prophetic leaders that have gone before us, whose shoulders we stand on. So I think they also point the way to what it means to kind of nourish this solidarity economy work. So I just wanted to quote one of my co-conspirators, Lorna Gold, who just last week met with a group of Catholic women religious who gathered to reflect on building a new economy. So I'm going to read you a quote from something she shared with them. On the ashes of the current economy, so marred by individual consumption, waste, greed, we can already see the signs of emergence of a resurrected economy. We can see green shoots that embody the logic of new regenerative economies more rooted in the patterns of death and resurrection, the cycles of life and abundance that mark existence. We see these in the growing movements for solidarity economy, circular economy, degrowth, rewilding, agroecology, for slow food and seasonality, for cooperative enterprises. All of these facets of a new economy are emerging in every corner of the world, often led by those who are unencumbered by old ways of seeing and thinking. They offer a glimpse of a compelling vision of a renewed economy in balance with nature and meeting human needs. So to close, I think there's this urgency now to breathe life and labor and land and love and finances into these emergent forms of economy at all levels. So I just wanted to close with a quote that I read recently from Pope Francis from his letter Laudato Si that I think speaks to this kind of collective imagining that we're doing here today. And it's this: an authentic humanity calling for a new synthesis seems to dwell in the midst of our technological culture, almost unnoticed, like a mist seeping gently beneath a closed door. Will the promise last in spite of everything, with all that is authentic rising up in stubborn resistance? So here's to all of you stubborn people. Thank you.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you, Elizabeth. That was great. Super, super. It is a great pleasure to introduce my friend Nathan Schneider, who does a great thing for us in the world, two things at the same time in one guy. He's a wonderful explainer. He explains to the world in his writings, in his several wonderful books, what this is all about, you know, at a level that the general public can understand, which is a very important piece of work to be done. He also is perfectly capable of diving deep, as in his latest book on Ethereum, co-authored with Vitaly Buterin, which I hope to read as soon as I can get enough coffee in me and sit down and work through it. Anyway, so happy to have you here. Nathan, how are you?
Good. I'm so glad to be here. Among you know, so many people I admire doing incredible work to build a solidarity economy. And I come to this having just had some meetings this morning that reminded me of how much of the world steers us against the kind of solidarity that we need. How many of our choices in things we might need to buy to make our way through our lives, through choices we need to make to plan to retire, choices we make about how we employ each other, how we work together, how we share resources, that actually incline us against solidarity. You know, I've worked for so many years with so many people trying to build businesses, organizations the right way, and in alignment with relationships and deep solidarity with each other and the planet. And some nudges in our legal and economic system just steer us the other way. You know, how hard is it to, for instance, you know, design a life in which we are not harming the planet? How much do we have to bend over backwards to make sure that we are being just to one another? And I think of you know, the challenge of an organization like this as being, you know, in some ways deeply simple. In the words of the Catholic Worker co-founder Peter Moran, the challenge of making a world where it is easier to be good, and doing that requires us to recognize how much the world as it is right now makes it hard to be good, makes it hard for people trying to do the right thing to actually do that, and how much of the current support ecosystem for people trying to do things in the world actually is organized around steering people into creating concentrated wealth into producing value for, a narrow slice of investors, and away from creating community wealth and community value. I think it's deeply important as a result that this project is based in DC, in the Rome of our time. The place out of which so many of these harmful structures emanate, and at the same time a place where we have made important strides in the past, where experiments have emanated into policy and enabled, for instance, the rural electric system to develop in the 1930s, the credit union system. The great achievements of solidarity economies in the past in this country have occurred because experiments around the country and around the world have made their way into these halls of power and have enabled us to shift conditions into situations where, at least in pockets, it has been easier to be good. One thing too, I really want to challenge this new project around, is against the grain of a tendency we have in organizations, and this is something I am experiencing, day to day in board roles that I'm part of right now. A tendency that we experience to direct our focus toward the interests of concentrated wealth and power. Increasingly, we have a shift from solidarity organizations grounded and accountable to stakeholders, to their members, to the people they aim to serve, toward a model where increasingly we are accountable to funders, and we're accountable to the trends among the elite. I feel that very deeply, and it's deeply disturbing to me. And as we develop new organizations, let's be really intentional about ensuring that we are putting our truest stakeholders at the center of what we do, so that when we make those hard decisions, it's those stakeholders that we are accountable to, more than the current anxieties of particular sets of elites. Second is just recognizing the incredible challenge posed by our deep inequalities of wealth and access and power. That Catholic social teaching idea of the preferential option for the poor is such a powerful demand on us. It's not something that we can do passively. It's a demand to be actively working at every moment, asking ourselves, are we carrying out that preferential option, knowing that every other nudge in our social structures and social lives is going to incline us against the preferential option for the poor. And the same could be said, for instance, about anti-racism. Everything in our social structures asks us to, in a sense, whether we like it or not, however well-meaning we might think ourselves to be more racist, in a society organized around racism. So to bring racial justice into our work requires us to ask ourselves that all the time, over and over. Are we overturning this system, this caste hierarchy that is so deeply built into our world? I know that this organization is committed to those deep challenges, and I thank you for that. Thank you for helping to make a world where it will be easier to be good.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nathan. Much appreciated. I want to suggest that even though we're launching a new organization here, as some of you know, there's been a bit of a lead up to this, more like 10 years of sort of underfunded lead up. So at this point, what I want to do is just give you a quick background through some slides as to where this conversation came from. So if you'll give me just a second here. So here's where we came from. As many of you will know, Solidarity Hall launched about 10 years ago, a kind of third way conversation, kind of bookish, people just trying to figure out, what else is there in the aftermath, in many ways, of the 2008 collapse. So the first thing we did was some publishing, and more recently, these titles came out. A new translation of Father Arizmendi's Reflections, the founder of Mondragon. Nathan was kind enough to write the introduction to this book, and the afterword is by Jessica Gordon Nimhard, the African-American historian that some of you may be aware of also in the co-op world. We have a couple of other titles you could check out if you like. Last summer, in collaboration with Elizabeth and New America, we did a series of webinars on good work, trying to figure out what is the replacement for GDP, what should we call it, and is it already out there somewhere on the ground in terms of what good work looks like. We have a podcast. My friend Pete Davis and I do kind of an oddball thing once in a while, interviewing people. And then finally, my co-editor at Ownership Matters, Julia Martins Rodriguez, is now the editor of Ownership Matters. She's turned it into this lovely website platform where she is inviting people to contribute articles, not only professional journalists, but anyone who might have something interesting to talk about. And she takes a very solidarity economy approach to that. So same URL, ownershipmatters.net, but Julia is now running that project, and wonderfully. So at this point, I want to, if I can, do a little bit of a sneak preview of what we're going to be programming. And I'm looking to see if Matt Noyes is here. Matt, are you out there? Matt is the co-author of a wonderful book called Cooperatives at Work. And I want to drop a link in the chat for the book launch event we're going to host 1 week from today. In fact, hang on a sec. Here it is. Cooperatives at Work. It's a new book. I just finished reading it. I took tons of pages of notes. It's Matt Noyes, George Cheney, Amy Doe, and 2 or 3 other collaborators. And it's one of the deepest dives into cooperativism generally, the spirit and practice, a real updating, and a delightful piece of work. So if you can make that a week from today, same hour, noon, we're going to ask Matt and his co-authors to talk about the book. Let's see. I don't know if Evan Casper Futterman is here. Do we see Evan? Maybe didn't make it.
I don't think I see Evan unless you've snuck in by another name.
Yeah, right. No problem. Evan is at the Bronx Cooperative Development Initiative in New York. And that's a large organization. And so Evan and I are working on some kind of event which would bring together people involved in these larger solidarity projects. We're thinking of downtown Crenshaw. We're thinking of the Industrial Commons. We're thinking of some of the work going on now in Chicago, in the Lawndale neighborhood, as well as Evan's own project in the Bronx, in order to share some best practices, to do what they do in the, the big time conventional economy. Managers get together and talk about what's working, what is not working. We need to build our infrastructure, and this kind of knowledge sharing is part of it. So hopefully in maybe a month or two, we'll have an event, kind of a summit for these larger organizations. And you can stay tuned to hear about that. Hey, is Nate Turner Williams with us? Another one of our board. Nate is the founder of a remarkable blog called Black Catholic Messenger. And he is speaking beyond the Catholic world in many ways. And I just wanted him to say hello, if you can, Nate, if you're out there. And tell us where this idea came from. He might be away from his laptop at the moment. He is also in seminary and is constantly busy. So if you can't chime in, that's good. I see also my colleague Felipe Witchger is here, a co-founder of the Francesco Collaborative. Felipe, are you able to check in?
Of course. So great to see this wonderful group here. So delighted to be with all of you. We're just continuing to build a pretty interesting community, Kelly, Elizabeth, and I, with our Livable Future Investing workshop, where we tried to draw on the Catholic social tradition, subsidiarity, social movement investing frameworks to kind of elevate alternative ownership and governance structures. So cooperatives figure quite prominently in our work, and a big part of our excitement is that we've had over 100 alumni go through our first 5 cohorts over the past 2 years. And those range from, multi-billion-dollar asset holders like Ascension Investment Management, who we had recently, Morgan Stanley and Cambridge Associates, these investment advisors that steward dozens of relationships with foundations. And then we've had lots of women religious, primarily nuns, Franciscans, Mercy Sisters, who have been just incredibly prophetic and investing in the solidarity economy and cooperatives for generations. But I think there's a new moment we're just entering with the new understandings of religious life that are evolving, and especially with numbers dwindling, transfers of enormous amounts of land and money, and how can it be stewarded differently in this new moment. So Elizabeth, I don't know if you shared more about that or want to add anything else.
No, I'm good. I did a good opening reflection here, but I think this work on the workshop is something we'd love to invite anyone who's interested in to join us.
Thank you. Great. Here in DC, where I've been only about 6-7 months, we recently, just last week, this is all happening at the same time for some reason, I don't know why, we launched a chapter of Zebras Unite, this wonderful organization that Sassy is with, and my co-lead on that project is here today, Shalonda Ingram, and we are cooking up a few things, including maybe a webinar on community wealth building here in DC, where there are the beginnings of this. Felipe has been involved in that work in DC going back a ways, and some other projects, but it's now reaching kind of the city council level, which is really great. But I wanted to have Shalonda check in and say hello from DC as well, if you're there.
Yeah, I'm here. Hey, everybody. It's so awesome to be a part of this community. I'm grateful that folks are tuning into this very urgent work that impacts my communities, all the communities that I'm from. I am a multi-lineage human being, and it's critical, this work. It's not like a matter of convenience or preference. It's actually about counting my siblings at night for me, right? And their wellness and how the world relates to us is actually dangerous. So the work that I do is very deep, very personal, and looking forward to supporting the community with repairing the trust, right? For us to do this work across class, across race, across gender identities, and how we build our households. So that's what I'm up to. It expresses itself in a multitude of ways, including the arts and rev share models for underutilized sacred spaces. But yeah, I'm excited and grateful. And also I'm grieving too, right? That these calls are necessary, and that the humanity of so many is still up for negotiation. So let's get to work, y'all. Thank you, Elias.
Thanks, Shalonda.
Well said.
Yeah, that was good, right? I want to recognize Dawn Carpenter, my friend here in DC, who is at Georgetown and is working on a project called the Solidarity Economy Workshop, similar, a little different, and they do something different. Dawn, tell us about the media work you mentioned in the chat to me here.
Oh, sure. I just want to say hello to everyone. I'm so inspired by everything that everyone is working on. So thank you for allowing me just a second to tell you what we're doing here at Georgetown. We have created this project within our labor center, the Kalmanovitz Initiative. And our program, as you mentioned, is Solidarity Economy Workshop. And what we do is really solidarity economy journalism. I came from investment banking, so I deeply rooted, I was the funding banker to the co-op bank. I mean, I've been with you all in solidarity all my career, but now we're telling stories. And so we started with a podcast, 250,000 downloads, and now we have been sought out by some folks in Hollywood to do some conversion of these episodes into video format. So we're in pre-production on some of those. We are still doing the podcast. And in fact, I'm teaching a class in the fall at Georgetown on solidarity economy podcasting. So I'm putting out a call to all of you. If you've got stories you want to tell, flood me with them, because we will have six episodes a season, and 2 seasons. It's kind of like an academic year, and then a summer season. And I'm working with a group of students at the University of San Francisco, another Jesuit university, this summer, to do a teaching guide to the podcasts. So we will distribute them through the network of Jesuit universities, through campus ministries, but also through their business schools. And to end all of this, I just want to let you know, we're also filming this summer and this fall a documentary about the economy of Francesco. So we will be in 9 different locations around the world, telling some of the fruits that have come out of the beginnings of this movement. So I just put it out there as an open call, DMC 266 at Georgetown. I'll put it in the chat. If you've got stories, send them our way.
Great. Wow. Great. All right. Good stuff. Good stuff going on. Let's see. I think at this point, I want to point out something that's coming here that's a little bit early, but if you all can bear with me, as I share an early stage idea, the question arose, to start another organization, it does some webinars, it does some podcasts, all that kind of good thing. What are we going to do on the ground? What can we do in a kind of a practical way? And so the Solidarity Workshop internally is beginning to think about this, and we have an idea, and I want to share a couple more slides to let you know what we're thinking. This is, again, early stage, but I think it's a little bit unusual. So let me go back to sharing one more time to the old PowerPoint. Forgive me. And the question is, what could we build? So we do want it to be on the ground, and also it should address some kind of critical need, ideally. One of those is the decline of social care in this country, which is very far from being a secret. We would also love to create something that could be a demo or a prototype in terms of its innovation, but also in terms of its possibilities for replication. And we want it to be part of a community wealth building process, because that's generally our solidarity orientation as well, of course. So here's what's missing. In a sense, there are all kinds of co-ops in the world, and in Europe, there is a particular flavor of co-op, which is sometimes called a community co-op. In Quebec, it's called a solidarity co-op, but it is multi-stakeholder. The membership is from all sorts of different people. That even includes, and this is the unusual part, members from the community, the government, and family members of the people receiving the care. In other words, you have an organization, an enterprise in which the various members are co-creating the care that is delivered. This has been going on about 30 years or more in Italy. It came out of a group of families who had special needs children. The government was cutting funding, and they saw their support going away. And in what seems to me a very Italian way, they self-organized and said, we're going to deliver this ourselves. We're going to partner up. And we even know of a particular business structure that would accommodate doing so. They did this, they've been at it for a while. There are many different flavors of social care, of course, from childcare to elder care, disabled people, immigrants, all sorts of work around this. And what you will find in the research is that these organizations create some of the highest levels of satisfaction and well-being among the people both receiving and delivering the care. So it's very far from being top-down. It is basically, community-driven. So that's a very inspiring model. In this country, we don't have them for some technical reasons. One of them is kind of legal. There's also the difficulty of funding, which is always the case with co-ops. It's a kind of a special animal, these social co-ops. But the question would be, could we create a working group and began to pull together what we do know about the way these social co-ops operate, kind of a feasibility study, try to figure out how far could we replicate or even duplicate that Italian model, which seems to be the state of the art. You can also find them, by the way, elsewhere in Europe and in Quebec. I don't mean to say they're only in Italy. And if we did that, could the end of the project be a kind of framework of some kind that would enable us to take the first step, create the first such kind of demo project here in DC on the ground, whether that be in childcare, elder care, something related to immigrants' rights and work, or something else. So we're just beginning to touch base on that. And the other reason we would do it, and here I'm borrowing from a guy named John Rostakis. This is part of the social economy, which can sometimes be another name for the solidarity economy. But what it's about in John's argument is what we're facing soon, or perhaps already, and that is the collapse of productive labor. Is the gig economy, which we're all increasingly being involved in, is undergoing consolidation and automation and extraction and all kinds of things. Stocks is saying this is going to finally hollow out what remains of humane work in the caring professions. So we're going to have a new class of people, if you believe the trends, an eventual majority in the industrialized world whose worth can only be reclaimed, note, in the domain of human, not market relations. So that's the field of the social solidarity economy, and it will require nothing less than the emergence of a new kind of market, a social value market. The activist Marina Citron said, care is at the heart of the new forms of organizing, which I think is a great quote. So a social market is one that elevates reciprocity and social value as the primary principle. You're reconnecting people through common interest. And you require, by the way, this is not a purely anarchist project, you require an enabling state, not a top-down state, but a state that partners, as they do in Italy, where this is all much easier to do, and it does not dominate. The other thing they're demonstrating is how cooperative values and democratic views of control rehumanize social care, restoring its social and interpersonal relations. So this is a wonderful, very big, very kind of lofty idea. This is the book. There are other people working on this. I don't mean to suggest it's only John, but certainly Elizabeth Garlow and I had spent some time with him last summer doing the Good Work webinars for New America. And we see this as just a great point of entry, which, as John is pointing out, could have kind of repercussions beyond the project itself, given the scale of the social or the caring economy and the need. So those are some thoughts about where we could go and what maybe our first sort of big project might be. I'm gonna pause for breath a moment here. Let somebody else chime in. I want to do something at the end with Edgar Cologne, but I didn't mean to go yada, yada, yada for so long. Let me start with you. What are your thoughts on this so far?
Yeah, this is absolutely delightful. And my kiddo has been very intrigued. I feel like one thing that is really coming up for me as I listen to all of these amazing endeavors, all of these intersections that I'm hearing between the work, and as I load up a whole bunch more tabs for me to read this afternoon over my tea,
Right.
I am really kind of, I'm kind of called back to what the reason when Elias pinged me and said, hey, you want to come co-facilitate this cool thing? I was like, oh, what is it? And the articulation that of the solidarity workshop as both a wisdom exchange and a community of practice for us working in the solidarity economy. I'm just really kind of both feeling that vibe and also craving a little bit more of like what is the shape of this particular wisdom exchange? What is the place where we shall practice as community practitioners? Like how are we structuring that? What is the invitation? And I'm both like literally inventorying, my projects, my skills, the things that I'm thinking about. I'm very intrigued about a social co-op. I'm super down for it. Currently in a multi-stakeholder co-op, definitely doing like applied research, want to make sure that that's replicable and available. So I'm running down those things in my head. And then I'm also like, and how can I fit this in between diapers and feedings? So I'm kind of like craving a little bit of thinking or clarity or sharing from the folks in this room. Like, what is the shape of this wisdom exchange? And how would we participate in a community of practice like this? So that's one thing that's coming up for me. I wonder if that's arriving for anyone else or if that's sparking anything in anybody else here.
It's a great question, Sassy. And I was just thinking similarly too, we have such a remarkable group of both intellectual thinkers that are contributing to the field so significantly right now, but also so many practical people in the trenches doing the hard work of really building this new ways of engaging. So I was just, eager to relate more across folks. I was proposing to Elias, even some little small group time here before the hour ends.
We have time. I see we have time. Let's do that.
So I don't know, Elias, you want to maybe co-host? I can help put people into groups for you there.
You're a co-host.
Okay. Good. Well, maybe Sassy, just tee up that question again, because I think that was so rich. I don't know if anyone else wants to kind of tee up any other questions that would be useful. And then I'll kind of tee up some groups here.
Yeah. Just kind of, I would love that. And I invite, oh yes, if Eliza has contributions of her own. I invite anybody else who's got kind of like a juicy question around this. But for me, it's really like, all right, here we are. It's a bunch of brilliant humans in this room doing, as Shalonda put it, critically urgent work. What is the shape of it in this container that we would like to fill it? We've heard a lot of different pillars of what folks are up to in the room. We've heard a lot of, thinking from Elias about what the shape of this might be. I'm particularly intrigued about the weaving of spirituality into this space. That's something that in my activist tradition is both like a thing and not a thing. And so I would just really love to kind of interrogate, as we do love to do, what would we co-create? What would be the community of practice here? And what would the shape and container of that be that you would be able to joyfully participate in and contribute to? So that would be my articulation.
Thank you, Sassy. And thank you for creating the rooms. I want us to just acknowledge our edges too while we're in the space, so that if there are folks that we're not well enough to serve, that we identify that, so that we minimize the harm that we cause just through our own self-awareness. That'd be awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. One of my favorite sayings that I've been bringing to the work a lot recently, because it's so easy that, the work is literally infinite. But the meaning of yes is created by the ability to say no. And so I just really like to bring that, I want joyful, consensual yeses to whatever we do, because then I know I can count on you, and I can count on you also to tell me when you need to take a break and tag out for a minute. So you can come back together.
In that light, maybe I'll do the room so people can just choose which room they want to go to. So I've had 4 topics so far. One is spirituality. One is this wisdom exchange. Elias, you want to throw out a couple of themes or people want to call on to have lift up a little more? I don't know, Sarah Horowitz, you want to do something on mutualism or anything? Who else do you want to call on here?
Yeah.
To lift up something?
Mutualism is a good one. Maybe more narrowly social co-ops if people want to dig a little deeper on that. And I'll jump in that one just to share what I've got on it.
Perfect. Well, I'm opening 8 rooms here.
Right.
So feel free to choose the one that feels like the best fit for you based on those quick themes. And Elias, spend about 10 minutes here. Does that sound right? Or a little more than that?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, 10, 15 minutes, a gracious, spacious 10 minutes. And I'll hang out here in the main room if anybody is having trouble getting into the right room. Go to, let us discuss.
All right. I'm looking for my prompt.
Yeah, it disappeared for me too.
This happens in old versions of Zoom sometimes. It disappeared for me too. You might have to manually move some of us.
I have a breakout rooms in progress, and then it's asking me to assign people.
Yeah, well, Elias, you're the host, so you just got to click join to the one you want. For the rest of you, though, I think you should go to the bottom bar. Are you able to see breakout rooms and then join? Is that an option?
Oh, I see. Scroll down. You got to scroll down. Right. Okay. Gotcha.
And I'm able to assign folks to rooms. So if anybody's really having trouble, just wave your little hand at me and I can make sure to put you into whichever room you'd like.
Great. Thanks, Sassy. All right. Here we go.
Thank you.
Oops, you're muted, Elias.
Thanks. Hey, Dan. Social co-ops, Santiago, Isaac, Matthew, Neural. We haven't met in person yet. Neural in Chicago.
Yes, except I'm visiting DC for a week and a half. So
Okay. All right. Very good. Very good. So here I am raving about the social co-op thing. I have no idea if this is possible. But Matthew and I have interviewed 12 or 14 people at this point, just trying to get a feel for the edges of the problem. Matthew, what's your sense of where we are with this? Are we going to get anywhere?
I think there's a lot of interest and, bits and pieces of it. But I mean, I kind of feel broadly that way about cooperativism in the United States, right? That we've got many pockets, kind of like what, Nathan was just saying about these like pockets for doing good. I feel like there's pockets for the social cooperative space, right? We have care being centered in new ways and in some ways very innovative ways, right? It's like we're starting to see like, the Brightly app, for example, like organizing cleaning cooperatives with both a franchise model as well as like an application. So there's like some tech to it. It's like growing thought pieces, lots of like nonprofit quarterly and ownership matters. So I think that like the thinking pieces are there, some of the, the people doing the work and the commitment to centering care in the work exists. So I think the thing so interesting for us is the infrastructure, right? Like what is the bridge between what's currently happening and how do we move toward infrastructure is really interesting for me right now.
Mm-hmm. There's another thing I just want to mention quickly, and I'll let everybody else jump in. In the Italian model, volunteers are members. So that has a couple of benefits. One is that, there's even more engagement by people that are involved with delivering the care. But also it's another aspect of the co-created care. You got more sort of people at the table. And then the other thing is it brings down the cost. I mean, you're taking some of the labor out that otherwise would have to be accounted for in the conventional way. And it introduces this idea of social capital, right? Sort of a time banking idea. You're exchanging, to a certain extent, exchanging time. So that's a little alien to most people, even though they might be aware of something like time banking, but it appears to be an important ingredient, particularly around just, as I say, minimizing costs, but also community involvement. So anyway, those are some of the things we've got to think about.
Yeah, I had some stuff come to mind when you were chatting on this for me, Elias. We've got like members who might be on disability or state benefits where they're only allowed to work a certain amount or make a certain amount of money. So there's like challenges in providing them with care and support and like a dignified means of living, but also not putting their means of living or means of support on high risk. Like if they make over a certain amount or they're like a full member and they have this much percentage of stake in the co-op, then all of their other stuff is at risk because they have, assets technically, on paper. So thinking about social care in the ways in which all of our various types of people can work and receive benefit and be contributing to the democratic processes without having to put other aspects of their life at risk, or if they're a volunteer because they only have 10 hours a week because they're working other jobs or whatever. So yeah, that came to mind for me as well, of structures that can support that and like the benefits of what can those things be offered. We were just talking about like, how come we can't figure out how to do like health insurance for everyone who is in a co-op, like in a certain state or in a certain grouping of types of co-ops. Like,
Mhm.
how can we network these things together to actually like get or build our own, or whatever those aspects of care and human care might be. Well, those are my
Yeah.
4 cents.
Yeah, that's good. In the Italian model, there's another piece that I've neglected to mention, and that's the consortia. A consortium is the back end. It's it's kind of like a fiscal sponsor or a funder. It's got technical assistance. And so if you want to get into childcare or elder care, particularly around Emilia Romagna, you don't have to do it cold. You join this kind of supply chain, which is awesome. And there are people beginning to work on that. For example, the ICA group and so on has an Elevate project that's pretty close to this. So it's not like nobody's thought to work on this before, but we certainly don't have much, and nothing like the Italian model. So if you have that partner, that does a lot for building up these kinds of businesses.
Yeah, there was I was listening to something, I'll have to track it down. Maybe it was another one of the events you ran, someone who was a death doula, and like they were with like an
Yes.
organ group of, yeah, okay. Yeah, like connecting those people and providing the means of training and certification for them as well to help them in those industries. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So this is infrastructure work. Dan, you do some infrastructure work yourself. There's the capital collectives, but this is a different kind of collective, this consortium idea. Is this doable? What do you think?
Yeah, so I know some of you, and for those that don't, I come from I had a long stint, about 11 years at Equal Exchange as a worker owner and elected board member, and involved in helping other co-ops for the last couple of years. My work has shifted slightly to basically BIPOC-led community-controlled real estate development. And I would say, yeah, the community control is a very broad, it's a broad concept that's sort of like solidarity economy, a little, fuzzy around the edges of the definition, but it's definitely, envisions a multi-stakeholder model. Often that's sort of a nonprofit that has kind of a golden share that can't be corrupted, so that 20, 30 years from now or 50 years from now, the whole thing can't be sold, because suddenly what was collectively built has some great market value. But I'd say it's essential to those efforts. Having people not just like residents of a land trust who live on a house that's part of the land trust, but of unhoused people who are affected by development. People, maybe even the neighboring community that are affected by the activities. Long-term residents, and it also involves government folks and academics, and so I would say that there isn't like a boilerplate template, but it's essential to have that multifaceted, multi-stakeholder model governance.
It strikes me that the work that you're doing in Chicago and Kansas City, you, Elizabeth, Elise, I mean, in a way, it's a little bit like these consortia in that it's a combination of finance, or fundraising anyway, and technical assistance, or even kind of community organizing.
Yeah, all three of those. I mean, and each area we've worked in has different sort of strengths in one of those elements, and maybe a bit weaker in the others. So it's not like you have to have everything perfect to launch, but you definitely have to be open to each of those three things and recognize that they're all essential. You can't just have it be capital driven, because that becomes the only measure communities have been sort of boxed into, you're off at the edges making demands on capital. And it becomes a very different thing when people have an effective, voice and vote in how that capital is utilized.
Yeah.
But often you need practitioners who have, who have helped other communities and can help you, so you don't have to create the wheel every single time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Good observation.
That's good. That's good. Anyone else want to chime in on this?
I had a bit of a question. Hello, Santiago here, Bogota, Colombia. Do the consortia have like connections to the state health services, or do they like channel those existing services, even if they're not within this solidarity economy per se?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is that part of the work they do?
What I understand about the consortia is that they are in the middle between the social co-ops and the state. The state is part of the funding. The ideal is not to go over 50%, because then you turn into a creature of the state, right? So they try to keep it below 50%. But the consortia come in and they actually play banker. A social co-op that generates, or any of the co-ops, they generate a certain surplus, right? And in Italy, there's a law that says those surpluses part of them are indivisible. They can't be shared around to the membership. I think it might be 5 or 10% go to whatever consortia you happen to belong to. And the reason for that is that this consortia create new co-ops, and even R&D work and other kinds of sort of legal regulatory, stuff, errands. So they do a number of things, and they're pretty powerful. I think there's really basically 3, and they come out of different traditions. One has kind of a strongly socialist communist background. Another has a Catholic background. Another something else. So they kind of direct traffic around these social co-ops, and they just enable them to a significant degree. So what you really need, therefore, is just a team of people that want to do the work. You don't need all this back end with the lawyers, the accountants, the marketing people, all that kind of thing. A lot of that is kind of ready-made to team up with, which is a powerful thing.
Right. Yeah, the reason I was asking was whether the idea of a social co-op would be to sort of replace systems of social care, even if they're—
Great question. Right. That's the thing. This is a delicate thing, and I've been told that in Italy they're pretty careful about this because they're very labor aware, and you do not want to create a project in order to get a bunch of people working for the regional government to be laid off, But it doesn't seem to work that way. In fact, that hasn't happened. What's happened instead is that they're dividing the work, and a lot of, for example, governments like the city of Bologna have said, you folks out there in the neighborhood, you're doing such a great job on this particular kind of social care. We're going to offload budget to you. You run it. We're going to be funding up to 50% of it, but we're going to collaborate on the project rather than just trying to do it top down. And that will leave the people that we need to be in the administration and in the bureaucracy. And yet we won't ask them to create the care. We won't ask them to get involved in the programming. We will have a very light rein on this thing. And everybody seems to agree, in Italy anyway, as far as I can tell, that's the right way to do it.
Interesting.
It's a delicate balance. In the UK, this is super sensitive, because when you start talking about neighborhood organizations taking over government services, they say, oh, here comes privatization again. Here's the welfare state being dismantled, another wall, and so on.
Elias, can I just interrupt you for 1 second?
Yeah.
I'll call people back to the big group now.
This time, yeah, let's do that. Okay.
Yeah. just, I was going to give people 1 minute for everywhere and then we'll come back.
All right. Yeah, Neryl's saying we have direct service nonprofit. Exactly. Catholic Charities is a giant one in this.
Right.
Yeah. No, true. So this is kind of innovation, trying to figure out which model might work. I got to think that also depends a lot on where you are in the local market. Just as though if you had a group of friends in your town who happen to want to start a cooperative business, one big piece of homework is to figure out, so what is it? If you're not just showing up from the get-go saying, we want to do a restaurant, you just want to do something as worker owners, then you got to get that right. That first decision is a big deal, figuring out what the local market is. What if we did this? What if we did that? Taxi service, childcare, these are all different universes, right? So that's just one more level of difficulty on something that's already difficult. All right, got about another.
Yeah, Luke just dropped something that we've been looking at, transparent and shared kind of financial management through Open Collective. Yeah, really cool. Like one of those pieces where we've got infrastructure to help. So anyway.
Thank you for reminding me. There are some people I should probably be talking to about where we'd like to go with this, because they're a little bit like a consortium already. That's a good thought. Thank you, Isaac. I know them a little bit. I know Mike Strode, who is in Chicago and is part of that great kind of blossoming of Chicago cooperativism that's going on right now. So, did you see, Dan, that Camille Carr and her friends just got 2.25 million from JP Morgan to do more Chai Fresh and 2 more co-ops, including housing on top of that?
I did not.
This is just came over LinkedIn or somewhere. So I'm sure they're feeling good in Chicago, at least around her neighborhood.
Awesome.
All right.
Elias, I just want a couple of groups are still needing, the spirituality group still needs a little more time, but you all can self-select into a different group or go back to the main room, I think. Elias, you can think about, or if you have a couple minutes to chat here, I just wanted to help you process the last 20 minutes here. If you want me to draw people back in for your last part of the agenda.
Sure. Okay. I guess we could go back to the main room. Or people.
Yeah, I think people will gradually go back there as their other groups wrap up, but you have a firm piece for the last 15, 20 minutes here. Do you know?
I do. I have about a 10-minute sign off from Edgar Cologne. He did a little video for us.
Perfect. Any other action items you want to draw people out on for like a final next steps?
No, I would just say, watch the website and LinkedIn.
Because you could ask people to kind of come back for the last like 3 minutes in a small group and just name for themselves what they want to go do next or something, or what was inspiring here, or a nugget that they just an idea, or the large group put in the chat, something like that. Just thinking.
Good thoughts. All right, great.
So I'll draw people back in so people can leave this room here. I'm not going to close the room formally, but you can go back into the main room. But just press leave the room in the bottom right, and then other people will gradually go back in. But I'll get everybody back for you for 13 minutes to spare, Elias.
Great. Okay, I got a question here in the chat. On LinkedIn. All right. Thank you, brother.
Hope you don't mind. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, it's perfect.
It makes for an entertaining and lively exchange. Hello, folks. As more folks come on back, welcome. Folks are still trickling in. I can see at least the spirituality room's caught in a really juicy discussion. Hopefully we'll welcome them back momentarily. But I hope that I saw from the levels of microphone activity, there were some great discussions happening. I'm excited to hear maybe a few snapshots of what those were, but I'm gonna pass the mic back to you, Elias, while I take care of this.
All right, thank you. Neil, Hazel, welcome. Nice to see you both. It's an all-star team here. We could just put on the most amazing all-star game. No doubt about it. Okay, I hope that was, actually, I got a couple of great ideas out of that little breakout. Thank you, Felipe, for thinking of that. And we have a final sign-off piece, which takes about 10 minutes, which we'll get to in just a bit. But let's open up and let anybody chime in that would like to chime in that hasn't done so.
And Elias, I wonder too if we might ask folks who want to just write a little nugget or reflection in the chat that's
Fine.
coming out and then we
Yeah.
can start to pop up things verbally too.
Yeah, I'm going to suggest that if you want to keep up with where we're going, there's, we're on LinkedIn. Probably things will appear on the website. We are using Twitter. And also I dropped my email address in the chat. It's simply elias@solidarityworkshop.com. Feel free to shoot me a note, reach out. Very emergent, that word that everybody is using.
Yeah. For folks that notice that Twitter is dying,
Yes.
there's Mastodon. And amazingly enough, the cooperative version of Mastodon is called social.coop.
Yes, right.
So would encourage people to, if you're looking for a Twitter alternative, to join the discussion at social.coop.
Yeah, that's good. Good suggestion from Felipe. Anybody want to volunteer a good question that came out of your small group or thought that came out of your small group conversation? Culture of care. Yeah. Give you a minute to write something if you'd like.
Are we writing or speaking right now, Elias?
Hi, Grace.
Hey, are we writing or speaking right now?
If you like, yeah, just drop it in the chat and then we'll see what people come up with.
Got it.
Wow, great stuff. Thank you, Hazel. Be sure and save this chat, everybody.
Elias, maybe as folks are continuing to populate the chat, I'll share something that came to me as we were breaking into groups, which is that we have in this collection of folks this incredibly unique combination of people who are practicing the solidarity economy and very practical manifestations, people who are thinking about the structural dimensions of the economy and the needs to create, be very strategic about the levers to shift the structures, and then people who I think are somewhat embedded in this very unique policy context moment here in the US, right? Where we have actually significant amounts of federal resources and legislation that's been passed that will be flowing in the next 12 months. And I think there's kind of this, as someone who has floated a bit between those spaces, they're very much not in mutual understanding. And there are like frequent, I would say there isn't a ton of connective tissue. And so something that I think many people here seem to maybe have the capacity to reflect on together. Like, is there both the kind of like really lived kind of wisdom of, or like lived reality of this kind of experimentation, like the social co-op that you're talking about, these real-time experiments, also reflected on in the context of what are the policy ramifications or implications? Like, where do these federal resources flow in the next year? Like, who's got the right relationships or connections to help feed that in too, right? Where do we create these policy feedback loops? So I'm just curious, in our spirituality group, we were talking a lot too about just the need to, like, if we're going to do the real systems change work, we need to focus on trust and trust building. And that is in part an inner journey, a journey of inward work. So how are we creating the spaces where we have the permission and the safety to do that?
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Great comments, great questions.
I feel like this chat is extremely rich, and I definitely want to make sure we harvest it to share out with folks, because there's some really good stuff in there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'll have to work through this.
Yeah.
Santiago is asking, how do we make sure social co-ops don't turn into some bureaucratic thing, with power accumulation and all of that? I guess, tell me if you agree, Sassy. I think the only answer is it better stay a co-op.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's has had the privilege of growing up in cooperatives and still being a practitioner, I think that the actual answer is that humans are really good at humaning, for better or worse. I have been in some terrifyingly bureaucratic cooperatives, and I've been in a couple of very liberating non-cooperatives. But I think the answer there is to continuously strive toward nimble co-creation, and to make sure that, to your point, Elias, that the incentives and structures of the business or the organization and the funding structures, and then what resources are funneled into it, are continuously bent toward that. And I feel like there's a lot of humans in this room that I want to talk with about, like, what does that look like in the organizations you've been a part of or supported, and like, how do you combat that tendency toward bureaucratic inertia, and keep people and the glory that we can build at the center of things. And especially, I'm really grateful to you, Elizabeth, for bringing into the room that in the US context, there are resources coming back our way. We see this in waves in the solidarity economy. Whenever we face some sort of crisis, be it economic or public health, people tend to remember that co-ops are a thing, or that mutualistic organizations are a thing. And then there's a wave of, oh, we should fund those to do stuff. And how do we do that again? And so we find ourselves in another wave right now. And I personally am feeling called to find ways to be that kind of interstitial tissue, because there are folks coming up right now who are like, oh, we want to do this. We're hungry for this. I'm thinking perhaps of folks in the technology sector that are starting up organizations and wanting to do it right. And I'm like, great, we have some models for that. Please don't reinvent the wheel. Come over here so we can collectively fund. So I'm finding that be an inquiry for me. And I'm glad to be in solidarity with folks on that. But as we went toward our last 10 minutes, Elias, you mentioned there was something we wanted to close with that took a little bit of about that time. You want to move us toward that?
I'm just about to do that. I'll just mention briefly, I don't think Sarah Horowitz is still here, but on the question of, what happens when these little projects grow up and start getting really interesting and start accomplishing something. Think about, I don't know, Boston Ujima, think about the Bronx Cooperative Development Initiative, downtown Crenshaw. Sarah's book, Mutualism, a wonderful book, highly recommended, points out that the origins of the New Deal, this gigantic thing that happened, really didn't happen so much in the paneled rooms of Washington, D.C. It happened because they were looking around the country and saying, we better start with what's already working. And they surveyed, New York, California, wherever. And they did this in order to scale up what was working. And it's a complicated thing that happened there. You could also argue it was in some ways not very beneficial for co-ops in the end when you took their best ideas and turned them into government programs. So that's a tricky piece of business, no doubt about it. But it is the way those larger government structures were enabled. And if we could get it right this time, then that would be a great thing. And it would be because we did this great work on the ground. Hazel wanted to say something.
I mostly just want to point to what I just put in the chat about the Facebook group I started something like 10 years ago, which does include Bruno Relance, who
Oh,
was the
wow.
Director General of ICA for 5 years, retiring 2 months ago.
Nice.
It's completely inactive, but I will go back in if any of you ask to join. I think it's
All right.
private, but yeah, please come in, hang out there.
Good to know. That's great.
If it's
That's great.
helpful.
All right. Okay.
Great to have places to convene around a cup of tea,
Yes,
and like
yes,
this
yes,
one. So let's wrap it up so we can release ourselves into our next cup of tea for the daily
Okay,
work.
all right. We're missing today a great comrade in this work, a guy that I think a few of you might know, Edgar Rivera Colon. I can't remember how we connected, maybe at least a year ago. Edgar is a medical anthropologist, taught at Columbia, now lives in East LA and is teaching at the University of Southern California. He is a kind of an LGBTQ activist. He is also a former Jesuit. And so got that training, that whole thing around discernment and so on. And he did, I should add also that he's very influenced by Grace Lee Boggs. And as I'm getting to know her work a little bit better, she seems to be a wonderful grandmother for what we're doing. She lived to be literally 100 years old. So she's a whole amazing thing in itself. Anyway, Edgar gave us a little farewell message. And in the message, he talks about this idea that Jamie will understand, and a few more of you inside baseball Catholic people, discernment of spirits. And he's saying in these times, not only do we need to keep our spirits alive, but this is a communal thing. It isn't just spirituality in the individualistic sense. This is a communal spirituality, which is kind of like a new idea. This is not the way it's usually, shall we say, marketed, right? So Edgar's going to touch on that, and part of it is in his idea around communal discernment. So let me see if I can get that going. And then we will sign off. There we go. I remember to hit share sound and everything.
I'm Edgar Rivera Colon, and it's great to be here at the end of this Solidarity workshop. I want to thank Elias Krim for inviting me into this process. I'm so happy to be with all of you and all the folks who are with us this day. I've been thinking a lot about this question of collective discernment, both, you know, as just a person who comes out of the Catholic tradition, but also someone who's interested in the kind of changes we need in our society to create a sustainable possibility for our futures of our children, grandchildren, all the generations that are going to come after us. So what a great opportunity to share and to reflect, to check in, see where we are, and also to understand both the urgency of the moment and, paradoxically, the need to slow down. And I think one of the things I've learned from the Ignatian tradition, certainly, is that discernment is not only individual, it's collective. And that collective discernment is about our desires and needs, and how do we order our desires, both individually and collectively, towards greater freedom, to really identifying those barriers that prevent us from being free to love. And at the heart of mutualism and cooperativism is the basic insight that human beings flourish fully when they're with each other, creating a life together in a dignified and equitable way. I think Pope Francis has pushed us to think about these things here in a time of many crises. You know, racial justice crises, social justice struggles around gender, sexuality, and of course the climate crisis, which affects all of us. So I think that today, as we begin to figure out how to discern collectively, let's take a moment and ask for the Spirit to come and guide us to give us those gifts of patience, of compassion, of mercy, and to build a better life for those who are most marginalized, most oppressed, and to encourage people to join this beautiful struggle of ours, the struggle to honor this home, this Mother Earth of ours, to honor all the peoples of the world, especially our indigenous family and siblings, and to prepare for a better future, to look at the signs of the times, come together, pray, create new forms of economics that are not based on exploitation, but also to discern collectively, to test the spirits and ask, what spirit is this? And I'm very happy that we're doing this kind of work. I'm sad that I can't be with you synchronously, but one of the great things I learned from a good friend of mine who passed very early on in his life was that our work, the work of justice, the work of building God's realm in this world, is to make the planet safe for human love and to live out the incarnation of God in history. And we know that we do that collectively and communally. Many blessings to you. You have my prayers to do this work. And next time I'll join you synchronously. God bless. Take care.
Edgar. He has a remarkable podcast of only 8 or 10 episodes with a rather amusing name. Karl Marx ate my field notes. Now that sounds silly. It's so good. It's so good. It's like a tutorial in kind of movement, spirituality, and radical theory, and it's amazing. Anyway, so we'll be back to Edgar. He's great. I have no other thoughts other than just intense gratitude for all you wonderful friends. Mostly this is like a cult of personality here, right? It's not really an organization. No, I don't want that. No, I don't want that. I don't want that. We need an organization, frankly, or hundreds or thousands.
Well, to that point, Elias, I was wondering if, as our last 30 seconds went to a close, what is the best way for us all to connect? I see a lot of organic connection building, gathering efforts in the chat. We've gathered this incredible group of friends and comrades and colleagues here. What do we want to do with our folks? Do we want to share attendee emails, or are you going to marinate on it with some wisdom colleagues and come back with an idea of how to continue to connect?
Matthew suggests a social.coop group. Certainly, when you register on Eventbrite, this is part of the strategy. You put your email in, so I know how to mail everybody. So in a week or so, we can come back maybe with some thoughts about what some next steps could be, and we can easily kind of keep it going that way on whichever platform we would like.
Fantastic.
Okay.
And just to make sure everybody has it at their fingertips, if they have in this immediate moment an idea for that, or a thought, or a desire to help support create those next steps, maybe you want to just drop your email again in as you continue to be, for better or worse, the organizer of this space in this moment. And then we can roll on forward. Excellent. And I just want to second. Yeah. Thank you all so much. It's a blessing and a privilege to share space.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Take yourself off mute, say hi.
It's Cornell West. Always a blessing. Always a blessing. Bye, folks. We'll be in touch.
Bye.
Ciao.
May we continue to survive and build.
Stay strong.
And Katie, are you sharing the recording later?
Yes.
We will. Miss the first hour and anyone?
Absolutely.
You'll hear from us.
And we actually remembered to press record, so we're good.
Okay, and does that include the chat, or do we have to figure out how to get that ourselves?
We'll get it out. We'll make sure that we have
awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, talk later.
Bye.
Be well.
Bye, folks.
Bye.